Chapter 51, Snake Sea Madness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It should be around here. After some searching, George found that the arrow had been deflecting within 100 meters nearby, so he asked ISA to control the plane to become invisible and stop in the air, and he jumped directly from the plane. Found it. Suspended over the valley next to the desert, George used his telescope to see a crude military base built next to the cave in the valley. Outside the base, there are piles of various artillery shells with the Stark Group's logo, and terrorists wearing simple clothes but armed with various firearms patrol back and forth. George did not launch an attack immediately, but quietly landed next to the valley under the cover of night, found a suitable spot for sniping, and then took off the sniper rifle on his back. He was not sure if there were any hidden guards in the corners near the valley besides the guards on the surface. If he went directly to launch an attack, the guards on the surface would naturally be no match for him, but if there were hidden guards who jointly sniped at him, it would be difficult for him to react. It's a pity that he still doesn't know the advanced spells such as the Disguise Curse, which can only be learned by senior students. Otherwise, he can disappear directly and no one will be able to find him. You have to find a way to get them to show themselves. Putting down the sniper rifle, George thought for a moment and gradually came up with an idea. Oolong comes out of the hole. Oolong comes out of the hole. Oolong comes out of the hole. Desert rattlesnakes appeared beside George as he continued to pour out spells. The power of magic in the Harry Potter world varies depending on each wizard's mastery of magic. The same fire magic, Dumbledore can release a sea of fire, the school wizard can only release a flame. The same life-killing spell, an adult wizard can use it as a surefire move, but the young wizard can only make people have a nosebleed. But the magic power of wizards in the Harry Potter world has no limit. If you persist, you won't run out of magic even if you keep releasing magic. At most, your body will feel a little tired after releasing magic for a long time. After all, you can't stand it even if you stand there waving your arms all the time. But as long as you have perseverance, casting magic for 24 hours is not impossible. The specific reason is unclear to George's current magic level anyway. He guessed that either the wizard's bloodline could convert external energy into magic power, so his own magic power was inexhaustible. Either the wizard's blood regenerates mana very quickly, just like a mage in the game. The mana regeneration speed is increased 100 times, and the mana will be fully replenished automatically without being depleted, but this is not an issue he needs to consider now. Now he is taking advantage of the fact that the magic power of his wizard blood will not be exhausted, and he is continuously casting snake summoning spells to form an army of poisonous snakes. I really deserve to be a student of the Snake Academy. Looking at the thousands of desert rattlesnakes spitting out their seeds in front of him, George moved his sore arms and felt that his throat was a little hoarse. Because he cast the spell with gestures, he basically only cast 6 or 7 snake summoning spells per minute on average. With more than 1,000 desert rattlesnakes, he had to wave his hands and recite the spell non-stop for more than 2 hours. I should find a way to learn how to make a wand soon. If he had a wand, he could basically do 30 snake summoning spells in 1 minute, and he could summon 1,000 venomous snakes in a little over half an hour. Go ahead and bite everyone you see. Under George's order, thousands of venomous snakes immediately spread out and began searching from top to bottom along the entire valley. No matter how secretive the terrorists hiding in the dark are, they will never escape the search of so many venomous snakes. As long as he is bitten by a poisonous snake, even if he does not die immediately, he still has to leave the secret post to receive treatment. Then it will be the best time for him to take action. Ah, there's a snake. Sure enough, not long after, George heard screams coming from all corners of the valley. Although he couldn't understand what the other party said, he must have been bitten by the poisonous snake he summoned. Then gunshots rang out, and the guards on the surface below the valley received calls for help and hurriedly dispersed to support the secret sentries who were surrounded by snakes. At the same time, a small boss in the cave also rushed into the bedroom of the base boss. Boss, it's bad, our brother outside was bitten by a snake. Idiot, if you're bitten by a snake, take medicine as soon as possible. It's not like you've never been bitten before. The bald boss, who thought the base had been discovered by the army, jumped up from the bed. When he heard that his subordinate had been bitten by a snake, he kicked him to the ground angrily. Being bitten by snakes is common in the desert. He can be treated with local methods and targeted medicine. It is really thoughtless for such a trivial matter to disturb his rest. Boss, it's not just one, it's many, at least hundreds. The little boss stood up and explained a little aggrievedly. The bald boss was stunned when he heard this. Hundreds of them, are you sure you're not joking? That it's normal for snakes to exist in the desert, but even if a few hundred snakes stabbed into the snake's nest, there wouldn't be that many, but he soon accepted the reality, because after turning on the monitor outside the cave, he saw the dense swarm of snakes attacking his men on the monitor, which made his scalp feel numb. Leave 2 to guard Tony Stark, and the others will go out with me with flamethrowers and eat roasted snake tomorrow morning. The boss is indeed the boss. Although his scalp is a little numb, he quickly came up with a strategy to deal with it. Using a gun to deal with a snake is like using a cannon to hit a mosquito. If you can't hit it, you will be bitten all over. It is better to use a flamethrower. At this time, Tony Stark in the cave was also startled by the movement outside. He wanted to look through the crack of the door, but was scolded fiercely by the 2 guards guarding the iron gate. More than 2 months ago, he was kidnapped by a group of terrorists because he accompanied the military to experiment with his latest missile of mass destruction. In the chaos, his body was injured by the shells he developed. Thanks to the rescue of the also kidnapped Dr. Ethan, he survived. Through Ethan, he knew that the weapons he developed to protect the country had become the executioner who slaughtered innocent lives. He also knew that the reason why he was not killed by terrorists was that the terrorists wanted to use him to make the most advanced missiles to rule the world. These once made him collapse and want to commit suicide. Finally, some words of Ethan woke him up, ignited his hope to live, and transformed a simplified version of the arc reactor and began to design the first set of iron battle suits. Don't worry, they are not targeting us. It seems that they have some problems outside. That's good. Ethan was relieved after hearing Tony's words. They have already started to build the parts of the Iron Man suit. If they are discovered, they will be dead. Outside the cave, watching the venomous snakes gradually disappear under the flamethrower, and the sentries being carried into the cave one by one, George silently set up the sniper rifle. I didn't expect this leader to come out in person. It's just right to start with you. Chapter 52 Truth and Lies. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Bang! A sniper bullet burst out, drew an arc under the influence of George's magnetism, and accurately hit the bald boss's temple, killing him with one shot. Seeing that their boss was suddenly shot in the head, the terrorists were dumbfounded on the spot, followed by screams and commotion. But there are also experienced people who can roughly judge the direction of the sniper rifle shooting based on the position where the bald boss was attacked, which is a crazy output. Someone even took out a rocket launcher. Fortunately, I distorted the direction of the bullet. George had already anticipated this situation. Because the bullet attacked in an arc, the attack position judged by those people was completely wrong and did not hurt him at all. Bang! 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 One shot after another, the bullets came from different directions and angles, blasting away the terrorists who fought back one by one. Even if they hid behind a bunker, the result would not change. Helplessly, the remaining terrorists who were still alive retreated into the cave in fear. In their eyes, they were not attacked by one person at all, but by a group of people. Otherwise, how could bullets be fired at them from all directions? It's almost finished. George put away his sniper rifle, floated it down at the entrance of the cave, then chanted a spell and pointed in the direction of the cave entrance. Smoke screen. A large amount of thick smoke poured into the cave, and the cave immediately became invisible. Drawing his pistol, he strolled inside. According to his judgment, there are probably no more than 10 combat-worthy people left in the cave at this time. Bang! 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 The pistol was fired continuously, and the bullets turned into various arcs and accurately hit the terrorists hiding in the dark who wanted to attack him. The smoke screen can hinder the vision of those terrorists, and it will also hinder George's vision, but George's telepathic ability can roughly perceive the psychological activities of nearby hidden terrorists and the aura of fear they exude. Using this as a position, he could accurately kill them one by one in the smoke screen. With his current strength, if it were a sneak attack, even an ordinary small military base could be taken down without any damage. Of course, it was just a sneak attack. Likewise, if he was attacked by a sneak attack, a missile could kill him. This is why he hides his identity so carefully and tries his best not to reveal his traces. As a normal human being in his previous life, he was too familiar with the power of modern technological weapons, so even if he learned magic, he would never look down upon organizations like S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra. To be honest, he felt that even magicians like Dumbledore and Grindelwald would not be able to survive if they faced a nuclear bomb explosion head-on. Sorry. When the smoke cleared, George came to the terrorists who had been unconscious after being bitten by poisonous snakes, and without hesitation pulled the trigger on them. He is a rational person, and his experience after time travel taught him that he cannot have unnecessary sympathy when facing the enemy, because it will only hurt himself in the end. Only dead enemies are good enemies. After walking to the innermost part of the cave and getting rid of the 2 terrorists guarding the door at the end, George used the unlocking spell to open the iron door and walked in. Don't be nervous, I'm here to save you. Those people outside have been dealt with. Looking at Tony, who was pointing a steel arm at him, George inserted the gun into his waist and said with a smile. After hearing George's words and looking at the 2 guards who fell to the ground at the door, Tony breathed a sigh of relief and put away the mechanical arm he had made that could spray high-pressure flames. As soon as he heard gunshots and screams coming from outside, he knew something was wrong, but he was not sure whether the person coming was a friend or an enemy, so he had to take precautions. Did Rhodes send you here? I don't know Rhodes. Let's go, we can go out first and then talk. After George finished speaking, he walked out of the cave first. Tony and Ethan looked at each other, picked up their things and followed them. When passing the 2 fallen guards, they also picked up their rifles, but it was obvious that they were overly worried. Apart from corpses, they didn't see a single living person along the way. When he came outside the cave and saw the bald boss who had his head shot, Tony couldn't help but murmured. Did you really do this alone? That it is simply unscientific for a person to single-handedly break into a base that is heavily guarded by so many terrorists, and not only kills everyone, but remains unharmed himself. But then, he saw an even more unscientific scene. Wingardim Leviosa. George cast a levitating spell to levitate the Stark Group cannonballs and missiles piled at the door one by one, and then arranged them one by one in order and flew into the cave. He wanted to completely blow up the cave and everything in the cave to ashes, and eliminate any traces that might expose him, such as the surveillance in the cave and the corpses. Who are you, a magician? Seeing George's magical manipulation, Tony was dumbfounded again. You can call me George, or you can call me magician. When you say that, I think I'm quite similar to magician. Maybe I can make money from this in the future, but now we need to stay away from here. He took Tony and Ethan into a jeep, and after driving to the limit of his ability, he detonated the terrorist grenades he collected at the same time. The strong explosion destroyed the entire cave along with the shells and missiles, covering up all traces. Why did you save me? Tony, who was sitting in the co-pilot seat in the desert outside the valley, asked George. It was hard for him not to be curious about George, a mysterious guy, and it was hard not to think about the purpose of his saving himself. Do you want to hear the truth or a lie? George asked after parking the car. What's the lie? Tony blinked. George smiled and said. The lie is that I think you are a very talented inventor. If you die here, it will be a great loss to mankind, so for the sake of all mankind, I came to save you. Although I think you are right, it does sound a little fake. Tony couldn't help laughing. He was generally very happy to escape from the clutches of the terrorist organization. What's the truth? The truth is that the stock of Stark Group plummeted after you were kidnapped, and I wanted to make a lot of money from it, so I came to save you. George said directly. He thought it was better to tell the truth about this matter. Tony Stark was not stupid. If he wanted to cooperate in the future, he should be sincere in some aspects, so as to establish a certain basis for cooperation. More importantly, this was also a test to see if Tony would close the weapons manufacturing department next. In the movie, Tony closed the weapons manufacturing department after returning, causing the stock to plummet again, but this was not a movie, and Ethan was not dead, so he could not be sure whether Tony would do that after returning. Now that this topic is brought up, I also want to confirm it through psychic ability and soul reading spell. Chapter 53 You are a very nice person. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I didn't expect that it was my money that saved me in the end. Tony smiled to himself. Also, in the eyes of others, he is a war criminal who makes weapons. In fact, his weapons do appear in the hands of these terrorists, so this is a matter of course, except for people with interests, who would be kind enough to save him, a warmonger. Besides your money, you seem to have nothing worth worrying about, but as far as I know, there are quite a few people who hate you. I remember that when I passed through Sokovia before, I met a brother and sister. The weapons in their country's civil war came from the Stark Group. Their parents were killed by your Stark Group's missiles. It is said that they will be together forever. I won't forgive you. George shook his head and said, although Quicksilver in this universe is dead and there is a high probability that there are no witches, it does not prevent him from using this incident to hit Tony and deepen his determination to close the weapons department. They deserve to hate me. I was indeed a self-righteous bastard before. Tony felt that his heart was stabbed hard, and Ethan from behind comforted him. You still have a chance to make amends, don't give up. His family was actually killed by the weapons of the Stark Group, but he understood that it was not the weapons that were wrong, but the terrorists who used the weapons, and through contact, he believed that Tony was kind-hearted in nature. He was deceived before and failed to see the truth behind it. After regaining consciousness, Tony's ability and assets will definitely be able to influence and help many people. I am Tony Stark, the most genius inventor and entrepreneur. How could I give up? After hearing this, Tony immediately hid his guilt in his heart, showed his usual bohemian expression as a cover-up, and said to Xiao Ji. Although it's because of money, I still want to thank you for saving us. To this end, I would like to remind you that I will hold a press conference at 5 o'clock in the afternoon the day after tomorrow. Sell all the stocks quickly before then, otherwise you may suffer a big loss. I just realized how weird you are. George looked at Tony with some surprise. He knew that Tony planned to hold a press conference to shut down the weapons manufacturing department when he used legilimency and telepathy. He was surprised that Tony actually told him directly, which was clearly a gift to him. Because now I'm not going to be an asshole anymore. Tony shrugged. In this case, we might still be friends in the future. George suddenly sensed something, stopped the jeep, opened the door and slowly lifted into the air. The troops looking for you will be here soon. I'm leaving first. If possible, don't tell others about me. The magnetism allowed him to sense that many cars and helicopters were coming in this direction in the distance. It was probably because of the explosion just now that Colonel Rhodes, who had been searching for Tony's traces, discovered it. This guy can actually fly. I'm going to get a guy who can fly when I go back. Seeing George ascending into the sky and gradually turning into a black dot and disappearing, Tony couldn't help but envy him. He decided that after returning, he would further optimize the drawings of the first-generation steel suit he designed before and add a flying function to it. Shortly after George left, Colonel Rhodes led a large number of soldiers to find Tony and Ethan sitting in the jeep, and George, who had already returned to the X-Fighter, had also contacted Lion before that using the special communicator on the fighter plane. You can buy, but remember to sell all the stocks before 5 o'clock in the afternoon the day after tomorrow. George, can you go back? After seeing George finish the phone call, ISA controlled the fighter plane and asked. Go back. George nodded, and then began to think about his next plan. As long as the news of Tony's return appears, the stock price of Stark Group will inevitably recover quickly. As long as all the stocks are sold before the press conference, a huge profit can be made. After the press conference, Stark stock will fall to an all-time low due to the closure of the weapons manufacturing department, and then use the earned money to buy a second time, wait for Tony to admit that he is Iron Man, wait for the Stark Group stock to appreciate in value, and sell some when you need money. Anyway, if nothing happens in the future, Stark stock will get better and better, but one thing should also be noted, that is, he killed the bald boss of the Ten Rings gang and destroyed the original design in the cave. Obadiah will be unable to create the Iron Overlord in the future, and there will probably be other actions. For the sake of his own stock, Obadiah cannot be allowed to jump over the wall and kill Tony, but he didn't want to kill Obadiah directly now. On the one hand, he felt that with Obadiah's presence, Stark Group stock could be slowly stabilized after the press conference, allowing Tony time to study the Iron Suit, thereby bringing back the stock price through the popularity of Iron Man. On the other hand, he could also wait for Obadiah to take action against Tony and make Tony owe him another favor. You must know that the most difficult thing to repay between people is the debt of gratitude, except for those who have no character. I need someone to keep an eye on me. It seems I have to hurry up and find a doctor. He had to cooperate with his clone in learning and researching magic, so he couldn't keep an eye on Tony Stark every day, and the one in the base who was good at this was Wolverine. It's just that he can't worry about Wolverine in his current state. He needs to help Wolverine solve the problem of toxins in his body as soon as possible, if possible. By the way, Professor X's epilepsy can be relieved, and the students' learning problems will be solved together. Before, he didn't dare to seek treatment from a doctor because he was worried that the doctor would leak their information after treatment, but now he has learned the initial forgetfulness spell, so he can erase the doctor's memory afterwards. The next day, the news of Tony Stark's return shocked the world, and the price of Stark stock rebounded rapidly, even exceeding the original stock price before the accident. On the third day, Tony Stark returned to New York on a military plane and announced that he would hold a press conference at 5 p.m. After the press conference, the price of Stark stock plummeted. That night, George met with Lion on the rooftop again. Mr. Death, this is the cash you want. Lion handed a box full of cash to George. This time, Lion looked at George as if he was looking at a god. In just a few days, his assets have increased tenfold, and now the money of the Lion family has exceeded the total of half of the 13 families in the Bronx. Tomorrow, use most of the idle money to buy Stark stocks again. George took the box and ordered, but he still didn't explain why, and Leon didn't ask, because Leon now completely regarded George's words as an imperial decree. By the way, no matter what method you use, go find me a few of the best brain and neurologists, and bring them to the rooftop tomorrow night. I need them. Before leaving, he handed the matter of finding a doctor to Leon. As one of the 13 families, a local snake, it's easy to find a doctor. Please rest assured, the best doctors in New York will be here for you to choose tomorrow. Leon patted his chest and promised. Chapter 54, Stephen Strange is kidnapped. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 54 The Kidnapped Stephen Strange. What did you say your name was? On the rooftop the next day, George looked at the tall man in a suit in front of him with a look of surprise on his face. The man straightened his clothes and replied arrogantly. Stephen Strange, I warn you, this is kidnapping. What you are doing is illegal. I will definitely find a lawyer to sue you. Will this guy be the future Doctor Strange? George looked at Leon next to him and asked. What's going on? Other doctors are willing to come if we pay them more, but this guy is unwilling to come no matter how much we pay him, but he is currently recognized as the best neurologist in New York, so, we forcibly tied him up. Leon took out a pistol and pointed it at Stephen's forehead. Boy, I advise you to be careful with your words. I know you have a girlfriend named Christine Palmer. You don't want her to be accidentally hit by a car when she goes out one day. Okay, I will pay attention, don't hurt her. Stephen showed an angry look on his face when he heard this, but for the safety of his girlfriend, he had to hold it back. It's really Doctor Strange. George raised his eyebrows. The name is the same, the profession is the same, and even the girlfriend is the same, so it can't be wrong. He only remembered that Doctor Strange was a famous doctor before, but he didn't know that he was a neurologist, but it's not a big problem. He became Doctor Strange 6 or 7 years later. Now he is just an ordinary person. He doesn't want to kill him, but just wants him to help treat his illness. It is estimated that it will not attract the attention of the old salted fish of Ancient One. Leon, put down the gun, don't be rude to Mr. Strange. Waving his hand to let Leon back, George stepped forward and smiled at Stephen and a group of doctors. Don't worry, as long as you help me well, I promise that your reward will not be less, or even more, and I promise you that you and your family will be safe and will never be harmed. The doctors looked at George wearing the death mask and swallowed their saliva almost at the same time. Some doctors regretted taking this order for money, but Stephen had just set an example for them. They all have families, and now they dare not raise any objections. They can only smile and nod together. Okay, since everyone has no objection, let's go now. George didn't waste any more time. He cast a floating spell on each person, then controlled the thin steel cable to tie everyone together and pulled them up. Stephen and the doctors felt like they were weightless and were being pulled up by George. They also widened their eyes and almost screamed. They were a group of materialists and really couldn't understand the magical phenomenon happening to them. Just when they were about to faint from being scared because they were rising too high, they suddenly entered the interior of a fighter plane. It turned out that in order to pick up this group of doctors, ISA had been driving an X-fighter and hiding in the clouds above the rooftop. Who are you? Sitting in the X-fighter, Stephen looked at George with vigilance in his eyes. If he had just thought that he was a gangster and asked him to help treat some important person in the gang, the magical experience just now had completely rejected his previous thoughts. He felt that he might be involved in some extraordinary incident, and if he was not careful, he might be killed and silenced afterwards. Don't worry, you will know who I am in a moment. No matter what the result is, I will not hurt you. George smiled and did not explain too much. He would not hurt Stephen and these doctors, but after curing Professor X and Wolverine, their memories must be cleared. The X-fighter was very fast and returned to the mutant school soon. George brought Stephen and a group of doctors to the medical room of the underground base, pointing to Professor X and Wolverine who had been waiting here for a long time, and introduced them. Professor X and Wolverine, you should have heard of them, right? That even if you have never seen the real person, the X-Men comics are still popular all over the world, so you must have heard of them. I always thought that mutants were just fictional existences. Looking at Wolverine slowly stretching out his adamantium claws, Stephen and the doctors showed surprise on their faces. Stephen and these doctors are ordinary people. If they don't see many things with their own eyes, under the deliberate guidance of the government and the media, it is easy to doubt some of the rumors in the past. Just like as a modern person, you have heard a lot of legends, such as the dragon falling incident, the Kunlun Mountain Hell Gate incident, and various supernatural events that the older generation has seen with their own eyes. But except for a very few who believe it, most normal people don't think it is true in their hearts even. If there is a Taoist who survives the thunder tribulation in the sky above the city, unless you see it with your own eyes, even if you see the video, you will subconsciously think that it is just a video synthesized by computer technology. Sometimes you may not believe it even if you see it with your own eyes, thinking that you have hallucinations from eating mushrooms, or seeing a mirage or something like that. The government wants to sincerely cover up something, and ordinary people really can't know the truth in their lifetime. These doctors are highly educated and firm materialists. If they didn't see Professor X and Wolverine with their own eyes, they would not think that there are really superpowers like mutants in the world. I'll tell you about their condition, and then you can discuss and come up with a treatment plan. George briefly described Professor X and Wolverine's symptoms, and also brought the virus samples that inhibited mutant genes from the Genetic Modification Research Institute. After Stephen and the doctors learned about the general situation, they first used the medical equipment in the basement to examine the professor and Wolverine, and then tested the virus samples before starting to study the treatment plan. At this moment, Stephen and these doctors were not only interested in money and their own safety, but also in the existence and condition of mutants. After all, such opportunities are rare. Seeing this, George stopped disturbing them and returned to his dormitory to continue to study magic with his clone. At night, Stephen made a request to George on behalf of the doctors. First of all, although the equipment here is very good, some of it is outdated. Here is a list. Purchase some new equipment as soon as possible. Secondly, after the examination, we concluded that Mr. Logan's body has the current symptoms. It is not mainly affected by the toxins produced by the adamantium alloy, but by the viruses that suppress the mutant genes, which suppress his self-healing ability. As long as the corresponding antidote is configured according to the virus samples to restore his self-healing ability, the toxins produced by the adamantium alloy can be easily resolved by his powerful self-healing ability. Including the loss of control of Mr. Charles's ability that you mentioned, it is also affected by the virus. Not entirely due to epilepsy. Finally, Mr. Logan's problem is easy to solve, but Mr. Charles's problem is more troublesome. I can tell you clearly that even if the toxins in his body are removed, his epilepsy cannot be completely cured due to the long-term damage to the brain, and he needs a long time to slowly rest, and it is best not to continue to use the ability. He is not Mr. Logan. His body is just that of an ordinary old man, and he can no longer withstand the backlash brought by the ability. Chapter 55 Peak Wolverine. You are listening at novelfull.audio. There is no problem with the equipment. It will arrive early tomorrow morning. According to your diagnosis, how long will it take to recover? George was not too disappointed when he heard the diagnostic report given by Stephen. Although it was a pity for him that the professor could no longer use his abilities, it was not a bad thing. If the professor can use his abilities at will and return to the level 4 peak mutant that can kill most people on Earth with the help of brainwave amplifiers, then their safety will indeed be guaranteed, but there are also limitations. Professor, there are no restrictions on the freedom of the children in those schools when they grow up, so that they do not become murderous weapons. However, in George's opinion, he is too idealistic, too naive to believe in the goodness of human nature, and always wants to use peaceful means to resolve the conflicts between mutants and humans, very stubborn in some ways, with different philosophies. Disagreements will arise when facing some things in the future. Will he or Professor X have the final say? In fact, although his current body is a mutant experimental subject, there is no concept between mutants and humans. In his heart, there is only the difference between his enemies and his own people. If you are one of your own, just unite around you. If you are an enemy, kill them. It's that simple. There was no need to distinguish anything. He even felt that Professor, there are many humans with superpowers in this world, but they never say that they are not human. Now that the Professor has been cured, his mind has returned to normal and he can no longer use his abilities. He can just be a teacher for those mutant children and help them develop their own abilities. Some unimportant things in the future can be left to the children who have grown up, and he can concentrate on magic. If your equipment is in place, Mr. Logan should be able to complete the removal of toxins in about 3 days. Mr. Charles will be a little later, estimated to be close to a month. Stephen made a rough calculation and replied. George nodded. Okay, after you cure the professor, I will let you go back as agreed. Hearing George's assurance, Stephen was slightly relieved. He didn't trust George, but he still had some confidence in the professor's character after years of exposure to comics. If the professor really leads the X-Men to save mankind many times like in the comics, he shouldn't be able to harm them. 3 days later, in the treatment room, Wolverine sat up from the treatment cabin, turned over and jumped down nimbly. At this moment, Wolverine is no longer in the form of Twilight Wolf with white hair and scars, but has once again returned to the peak Wolverine he once was, full of muscles. At his peak, Wolverine had nearly 200 years of fighting skills, a nearly immortal body, and powerful self-healing abilities. As long as he didn't encounter someone who was particularly restrained, he was basically difficult to defeat. Even mankind's most terrifying weapon, nuclear bombs, cannot kill him. He is the nemesis of all firearms. Compared with the Wolverine at his peak, the X-24 cloned by Dr. Rice is simply on the ground and in the sky. Not only is clone X-24 not as capable of self-healing as Wolverine, but his mind is not sound, let alone his fighting skills. He just fights based on instinct. Even the little wolf girl will be able to defeat X-24 when she grows up. I haven't felt like this for a long time. That Wolverine popped out his adamantium alloy claws very smoothly, and couldn't help but let out a sigh. Body hormones affect the body's shape. In his previous aging state, his mental state also felt like he had entered his twilight years, but now that he has recovered, he feels younger again, both physically and mentally. It feels like when I was 20 years old, I could stay up all night playing pixel games on a broken computer with a terrible graphics card, but at the age of 40, even if you are equipped with a top-end computer and downloaded a bunch of AAA masterpieces, you will lose interest after playing for an hour. It's like when you're 20 and you face your wife 7 times a night, it's okay. When you're 40, you can hide from your wife whenever you can, but even once you're a little helpless. Logan, I need you to help me spy on someone. Seeing that Wolverine had completely returned to his peak, George also informed him of what he had done during this period and his surveillance plan for Tony. Wolverine is different from Professor. If there is no special danger, there is no need to take action. If anything happens, notify me as soon as possible. I know it won't hurt our pocketbooks. Wolverine lit a cigar, clearly happy to take on the task. He will not let the family he built with great difficulty be destroyed again, so as long as it does not violate his bottom line, he is willing to do it for the sake of this family. Mr. Logan, do you think it's appropriate for you to smoke here? Do you want me to get you another ashtray? Steven, who was debugging the equipment, saw Wolverine who had come down from the equipment smoking a cigar in the treatment room, and immediately scolded him rudely. He was not a good-tempered person. He was a little unhappy about being forcibly kidnapped. He just didn't dare to confront George for the safety of his girlfriend, but he didn't have such a good attitude towards other people. Sorry, Dr. Steven. Wolverine immediately put out the lit cigar in his palm. He was very tolerant of the doctor who cured his body. Besides, it was not good to smoke cigars here. The professor was still being treated in another instrument. 3 weeks later, the toxins in Professor X's body were all cleaned up. After a difficult brain surgery, the epilepsy symptoms were greatly relieved. In the later stage, he only needed to take medicine regularly to live like a normal old man. It must be said that Steven's medical skills were really good. George also sent Steven and the doctors back to the city after giving them generous rewards as agreed. Don't worry, we will never tell anyone about our experience this month. On the roof of a building, Steven and the doctors were put down by George and swore together. During this period, most of them sympathized with the professor and the mutant children, and they also received generous rewards, so they really planned to keep this matter to themselves. However, George shook his head. Sorry, although I want to believe you, I still have to take protective measures for the safety of the children. Waving his hands, he began to cast spells one by one on Steven and the doctors. Oblivion. Things like oaths and promises are unreliable for most people. He believed that under normal circumstances, these doctors might really keep secrets for them, but if someone put a gun to their necks, or to the necks of their families, could they still keep secrets? So the safest way is to kill them all, but he is not the kind of person who really has no bottom line, so the forgetfulness spell is the best choice. Chapter 56 A large number of mutant clones. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At the same time, inside the headquarters base of Yakley Gene Company, Sandor Rice looked at the strong bodies filled with instruments in the glass container and his latest experimental data, and couldn't help laughing loudly. I knew I could do it. Soon, I will be the master of this world. All countries will surrender to me. I will become the only king of the earth. The last time X-24 was dispatched to hunt down the escaped mutant children, he failed, but by collecting corresponding data, he also further improved his experiments on mutant clones. After these 3 or 4 months of research, in addition to recreating many new Wolverine clones, he also made new breakthroughs in recreating other mutant clones. Give him another month or 2, and maybe he can recreate Professor X, Magneto, Phoenix and Cyclops. It's just that through simple tests, the abilities of these clones are much worse than the original ones. Of course, he knew that even if he made a corresponding clone, the strength would not reach the level of the original body, but even if it was only 20 to 30%, it should not be underestimated. In particular, he took the quantitative route. In a few more years, he could create an entire army of cloned mutants and then use computers to control them remotely. It would not be that difficult to conquer a country. A level 3 Magneto clone might not be that strong, but with 1,000 level 3 Magneto clones, would there be a chance to compete with Magneto? Although it is only a sign now, there is already a sign and a way forward. As long as things go well in the future, it may not be impossible. By that time, no country will be his opponent. If George were here, he would definitely tell him that he was too naive and that the world was far from as simple as he thought. Let Donald come over here. After sorting out the experimental data, he seemed to remember something, picked up the communicator and called Donald, the commander of the base, over. How about it? Have you found any trace of those failed products? No exact location yet, but it's confirmed to be in New York. Although they have been changing cars on the road, according to the tracking of our tracking experts, it is confirmed that they finally entered New York City and have not come out until now. They should be hiding in some secret place. Commander Donald reports. During this period of time, his energy was basically focused on searching for Wolverine and experimental subject number 757, because he wanted to clear up the shame of being at the border factory. It's a pity that the clue was cut off when it arrived in New York. The other party seemed to have stopped its activities after entering New York. The clone body will need to collect data through actual combat, and those failed products will also have to be dealt with. When I perfect the cloning technology, I will create a clone of Caliban, use Caliban's ability to track mutants to quickly help you find their traces, but if you fail again this time, there is no need to come back. Dr. Rice said in a cold tone. When Donald heard this, cold sweat broke out on his face, because he knew that what the boss said this time was true. Don't worry, I will definitely bring all their bodies back to you this time, including Wolverine and Professor X. Okay, you don't have to worry about looking for it now. I will let you know when I have the baby's clone ready. Dr. Rice waved his hand and made Donald retreat. He felt that he was better than the doctors who studied mutants in history, such as Dr. Trask and General Stryker, who were only allowed to carry their own shoes. Those sentry robots and synthetic mutants they built are not as powerful as their own army of clone mutants. The most important thing is that these clone mutants are controlled by computers and absolutely obey his orders. They are not afraid of death or rebellion, and their loyalty is more guaranteed than that of Donald. It's a pity that there isn't much adamantium left, so these replica Wolverines can only use bone claws. That's good, it just happens to be able to restrain that experimental subject number 757. Adamantium alloy is rare. Most of it was used on X-23 and X-24 before, and there are not many left in the base, so the following Wolverine clones are all original bone claws. The bone claws are not restrained by the magnetic force of experimental subject number 757, to be honest, he really couldn't figure out why the failed experimental subject number 757 became so strong. Later, he synthesized several similar ones, but the experimental results were very unsatisfactory and very rubbish. 5 of them could not defeat a single Boneclaw Wolverine clone, so he had to give up on his stupid decision to clone experimental subject number 757. Also at this moment, in the director's office in the Trident Building, the SHIELD headquarters in Washington. Director, Tony Stark is unwilling to cooperate. We need time to take our time. Nick Fury nodded when he heard Coulson's return in the video. It's impossible for Tony Stark to escape from those terrorist bases with Dr. Ethan intact. According to our survey of the base, there must be a third party helping. In addition to finding out who hired the terrorists to attack Tony Stark, your current task is also to find out what the third party force was that rescued him. Understood, Director. After Coulson finished hanging up the video over there, Nick Fury picked up another file and started reading it. About half an hour later, he called Natasha Romanoff, the top female spy of S.H.I.E.L.D., into the office. Based on the investigations over the years, we have confirmed that the disappearance of mutants is closely related to Arkley genetics, and recently we have received intelligence that they seem to be using mutant genes to make some artificial mutant weapons. I hope you can sneak into their base and find out what their purpose is. It would be best if you can get their experimental data as evidence so that we can intervene. Arkley Genetics is a global company with connections to senior officials in many countries. If there is not enough evidence, S.H.I.E.L.D. will not act rashly, which will cause dissatisfaction with the World Security Council and thus block S.H.I.E.L.D.'s funding, so the best way is to send Black Widow to sneak in and collect evidence secretly. Of course, he is also very interested in the genetic experiments of Arkley Genetics. If it is useful to enhance the strength of S.H.I.E.L.D., he does not mind letting S.H.I.E.L.D. scientists continue to study. Yes, Chief. The Black Widow, wearing a black tights, with an attractive face and a great figure, nodded and accepted the task. For her, this was not a difficult task. Her last task was to infiltrate the country's top level and collect evidence of a general's treason. Before the general was arrested, he still believed that he had met true love beyond his age in his later years and did not believe that she was an agent. Chapter 57 George the Studious. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the other side, George once again entered into the rhythm of concentrating on researching and learning magic. With Wolverine on Tony Stark's side, it doesn't seem to be a big problem, and Tony Stark is not stupid, so he won't be killed by Obadiah so easily. Even if you are killed in an accident, there is nothing you can do. At most, the stock will fall again and you will lose some money. When you become stronger in the future, you will naturally have the opportunity to earn it back through other methods. For him now, establishing a relationship with Tony Stark is certainly better for future development, but if he doesn't take this step, it's not a dead end. Money is a general equivalent. It is useful only if it is spent. If it is not spent, it is just waste paper. No matter how badly the Stark Group stock fell, given its size, the stock could still be exchanged for a lot of money, enough for them to spend 7 or 8 years. By that time, he would have already learned the Muggle shielding charm and the loyalty charm, and he would not have to worry about the safety of the school. Therefore, it is most important to focus on magic. And everything else is secondary. Hogwarts Castle, Charms Class, Professor Flitwick is instructing on the essentials of the levitation charm. Don't ever forget that subtle wrist movement we've been training, 1 swipe and 1 twitch. Remember, 1 swipe and 1 twitch. It is also very important to recite the spell correctly, and don't forget the wizard Barufio, who said that F instead of an S and found himself lying on the floor with a buffalo standing on his chest. That's not bad. With this technique, you won't be short of beef in the future. After hearing the example given by Professor Flitwick, George secretly complained. In fact, he was just complaining. According to the magic knowledge he learned during this period, he knew that the cow was not transformed out of thin air. It was either a transfer of nearby cows, or something similar to a transformation spell. Magic is magical, but it also follows its own rules and is not omnipotent. At least it is impossible to conjure food and water out of thin air. Many magic spells that conjure cows, snakes, horses, birds, flowers, etc. are actually extended magic of transfer and transformation. If it is a transfer type, things that do not exist around you cannot be transferred. For example, if you are in a desert, even if you say F instead of S 100 times, there will be no cows. If it is a transformation type, then the cow is affected by magical transformation. Once the magic effect ends, it will disappear or return to its original appearance. It is impossible to get countless free beef to fill your stomach in this way. At most, you can just taste it. There are many similar rules in magic. If you don't study them carefully and understand the taboos, you may accidentally get yourself into trouble one day. Luna's mother died from the experiments and improvements of the curse. Now, everyone starts practicing. After explaining the theoretical basis of the levitation spell, Professor Flitwick asked everyone to try practicing with feathers. At this time, George was not low-key. He naturally raised his hand and cast a floating spell on the desk next to him. Wingardim Leviosa. As the spell sounded, the desks immediately floated above the classroom, leaving the little wizards who were still trying to make the feathers float in a daze. Very well, George, 5 points for Slytherin. Although I was a little distracted in class, points still had to be earned. After class, Professor Flitwick picked up his textbook and was about to leave the classroom, but how could his short legs outrun George, who was faster than a rabbit, and was blocked directly at the door of the classroom. Looks like my lunch will be delayed again, Professor Flitwick said helplessly. It was obvious that this was not the first time that this happened. He was very pleased, but also a little confused. George had a smile on his face. Professor, I have been learning Muggle shielding spells recently, and there are a few things I don't understand that I would like to ask you for help. I think you won't mind wasting this little time to answer the questions for your eager student. There was nothing he could do. The professors had many classes and had their own private matters on weekends. He really couldn't find anyone without waiting after class. Not all professors are like Snape and are willing to use their personal time to teach magic. An hour later, George let Professor Flitwick go with satisfaction and walked to the Great Hall to have lunch. Halloween will be in 2 days, but the weather has not improved. It has been raining for a week and it is still raining. Although it was raining, he was in a good mood because his magic question had been answered. Harry, Ron, Hermione, haven't you eaten yet? As soon as he entered the Great Hall, George saw the trio of Harrys at the Gryffindor table. Normally there would be very few people in the auditorium at this point, so the 3 Harrys were extremely conspicuous there. George, we were discussing the death anniversary party. With a grimace, Harry told him about being invited to the death anniversary party. It turned out that when he came back from Quidditch training yesterday, he accidentally soiled the floor of the castle. He happened to be caught by the gatekeeper Filch again, and it was nearly Headless Nick who helped him. So he promised Nick to go to the basement to attend Nick's 500th death anniversary party on Halloween. Don't be so depressed. Halloween parties happen every year, but the ghost's death anniversary party may only happen this once. I think it will definitely be wonderful. I will accompany you then. Hermione was obviously very interested in this unknown ghost party. Ron held the opposite opinion. Why would someone celebrate the day of their death? I think it's so unlucky. Harry has already promised Nick. He said he must go to the party and cannot keep his word. Hermione stood up and looked at Ron condescendingly, threatening to start a fight. Ron was so frightened that he quickly changed his words. You are right, Harry. As a good brother, I will accompany you. Thank you. Harry's expression felt a little better, and then he looked at George expectantly. George, do you want to come and see it together? I'll forget it, I don't want to miss my first Halloween at Hogwarts. George smiled and declined Harry's invitation. If he remembered correctly, the Basilisk first acted on Halloween and petrified Filch's cat. As for the Basilisk and Voldemort, he doesn't want to come into contact with them so early now, and he is indeed interested in the Halloween party at Hogwarts. A friendly reminder to you, according to the records I read in the Book of Ghosts, ghosts cannot eat normal food and can only get some sensations by smelling those extremely pungent smells. Therefore, I guess the food at the ghost dinner is most likely to be food that has been rotten for a long time. It is best for you to bring something to eat before you go, otherwise you will be hungry. Oh, Merlin, I shouldn't have promised Headless Nick. Harry suddenly fell into despair, and Hermione asked George with great interest. The Book of Ghosts, is this a library book? Why haven't I seen it? On the top of the third bookshelf from the bottom, there is only one in the whole library. It's normal that you can't see it. I went to look for it specifically because I'm interested in ghosts. George picked up the food that the house elf had magically delivered to him on the table, and started chatting with Hermione while eating. He was looking for books about ghosts, not only because he was interested, but also thinking about whether he would have the chance to transform into a ghost form and survive first, and then find a way to resurrect him if his lifespan came to the end or was accidentally killed. Chapter 58, The Basilisk Appears. You are listening at novelfull.audio. October 31st, Halloween Eve. As soon as George walked into the castle hall in the morning, he smelled a sweet and tempting roasted pumpkin. Today's breakfast is basically all pumpkin related, probably because he got a lot of ingredients from Hagrid, but to be honest, the cooking skills of house elves are really good. No wonder Tonks always said that she missed the food of Hogwarts. He, who doesn't like Western food very much, occasionally feels a bright feeling. If there is a chance, he plans to see if he can get one in the future and use it as a butler for himself. After the last class in the afternoon, the little wizards walked to the Great Hall in groups. George, as the star of Slytherin, was naturally surrounded by his classmates. Have you heard? Dumbledore also specially invited the skeleton dance troupe for this Halloween dinner. Wow, is it the dance troupe composed of all skeletons? Amid the excited discussion of the little wizards, George stepped into the Great Hall. The Great Hall was decorated with colorful lights. 1,000 live bats were flying on the walls and ceiling, and another 1,000 were like low dark clouds, hovering above the dining table. There were huge pumpkin lanterns floating in the sky above the Great Hall, each of which was big enough to hold 2 or 3 little wizards. It was a pumpkin specially made by Hagrid using the expansion spell, and George was there at the time, but he was not interested in pumpkins. He was interested in the expansion spell. The expansion spell, a spell that can make a person expand rapidly and float like a balloon, has the same effect on objects, but it is important to control the effect, otherwise it is easy to overexpand and explode. George was interested in this spell because he thought that if he knew this spell when he escaped from the base before, he could expand the grenades by more than 10 times when he controlled them to fly out. It would not be a simple blow-up of a few houses, maybe the whole base could be blown up, but this spell is not easy. Even if he asked Hagrid for advice, he has not yet fully mastered it. Of course, the main thing is that he wants to learn too many magic theories and spells. The expansion spell is not the most important one, so he can only put it in the back row, which naturally takes less time. Otherwise, if he studies this spell every day, he would have learned it long ago with 2 bodies. The Halloween party at Hogwarts did not disappoint George. The house elves carefully cooked a variety of delicious food piled up, the professor showed gorgeous and interesting magic, and the skeleton dance troupe performed funny performances. These are not things he can see in the normal world, and they also opened his eyes. Compared with watching movies, the immersive experience is much more wonderful. Many things cannot be experienced by words and images without personal experience. You will not feel anything no matter how high Mount Everest is on TV, but when you really stand there, you will understand why it is the highest peak in the world. After the dinner, everyone dispersed, and the Slytherin students also chattered and walked towards the dormitory in the basement, including George, but at a corner, they suddenly stopped, because they saw Filch's Mrs. Norris hanging upside down on the torch stand, her body stiff and her eyes dull, and there were a few big words written on the wall next to the torch. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened, those who are enemies of the air, beware. Standing on the other side of the wall were Harry and the other two who were also scared. Those who are enemies of the air, beware. You are next, Mud. Malfoy immediately walked out of the crowd and excitedly started to mock Harry and the other two, but he was only halfway through his words when George behind him pressed his shoulders. Malfoy, now is not the time to do this kind of thing, go and notify the headmaster and professors to deal with it. Malfoy looked back and saw that it was George, hesitated for a moment, or shut up and turned to trot towards the great hall. Soon, Dumbledore, Snape, Lockhart, McGonagall and other professors rushed over, including Filch. Filch was so angry that he roared when he saw his beloved Mrs. Norris petrified. He believed that Harry must have done this to avenge him. In the end, Dumbledore personally explained that this was not a spell that a junior student could use, and that Mrs. Norris could still be saved. George did not speak out about the Basilisk in public at this time. Although he might get extra points, he did not want to get involved now. After Harry and the other two were taken away by Dumbledore, he returned to the common room with the other little wizards of Slytherin. The other little wizards were basically talking about the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets, but he still found a corner to study the magic book. This scene also made those little wizards secretly admire him. After Halloween, the castle fell into peace again, but the topic of the Chamber of Secrets had not decreased, and many little wizards believed that Harry was the heir of Slytherin. That day, George, who was reading in the library, was found by Harry and the other two. You suspect Malfoy is the heir of Slytherin and he wants to kill all the Muggle-born children in the school. Their whole family is in Slytherin and he often brags about it to others. I suspect they are probably descendants of Slytherin. His father is evil enough, he must be the heir. Harry said with certainty. Ron followed up with a guess. Maybe they have the key to the Chamber of Secrets for centuries, and it has been passed down from generation to generation, from father to son, and from son to grandson, so it came to Malfoy's hands. I think no one except him hates wizards born in Muggle families so much. Last time he called me a mudblood. Hermione also agreed with the two's guess. Even if your guess makes sense, how can you prove it? You can't convict him just by guessing. His father has great power in the Ministry of Magic. George said with a smile. Malfoy is not a descendant of Streeling, but Voldemort is, but he won't tell the trio. So, George, we need your help. The three of them moved closer to George. We need you to help us get the hair of Goyle, Crabbe and Millicent, and tell us the password to enter your Slytherin common room. This is not a difficult task, but what do you want to do? George asked knowingly. Harry trusted George very much and did not hide anything. We plan to make Polyjuice Potion, disguise ourselves as these three people, and go directly to the Strelling common room to get Malfoy to talk. That's a good idea, but you have to know that doing so violates at least 50 school rules. Who of you three came up with it? George nodded and asked casually. Harry and Ron pointed at Hermione at the same time. They couldn't come up with such a good plan because they didn't know what Polyjuice Potion was at all. Chapter 59 Freezing Curse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It seems that our Miss Hermione is really suitable for being sorted into Gryffindor. George couldn't help but joked after hearing this. Hermione and Professor McGonagall belong to the same type of people. They are both people who follow the rules and follow the dogma on the surface, but in fact they are more adventurous than anyone else. 80% of Harry and Ron's actions that violated school rules came from Hermione. he felt that the reason why Hermione was so angry with Harry and Ron at the beginning of term was not because they got into a big trouble, but because she was missing from the car. Hermione's face turned red and she didn't retort, she just asked. "It's a pity that I searched the entire library and couldn't find the powerful potions that Snape talked about in class. Without the recipe for Polyjuice Potion, you can't make Polyjuice Potion. George, have you seen this book in the library? Powerful Potion, I have some impression, it seems to be in the restricted book area." George thought for a moment and replied, a look of surprise suddenly appeared on Hermione's face. "The forbidden book area, you can actually go to the forbidden book area? This is also thanks to Professor Lockhart. As long as you learn to compliment his books a few words and then make up any excuses, you can trick him into giving you a note to go to the restricted book area to find books at random. Next time you go there, I will help you find the magic book called Powerful Potion." George winked at Hermione. Since the last time he went to the restricted book area to borrow a magic book about the tracking curse, he went there several times, but because of Dumbledore's surveillance, he never touched a book about dark magic. "What I borrowed were some magic books about advanced spells. He can't learn those spells with his current ability, but it's better to memorize them first." He took the initiative to help the trio this time because he also wanted to send a signal to Dumbledore, a signal that he is Harry's friend and that he can help Harry in the restricted area, so that Dumbledore will be open to him. Otherwise, he often uses Lockhart to enter the restricted area, and sooner or later Dumbledore will want to fix this bug. The key point is that as the principal, Dumbledore is fully capable of this. As long as he says a casual word, he will no longer be able to happily look for books in the restricted book area. He had this consideration in mind when he chose to get close to the trio. As expected, I just said Lockhart was a brainless idiot. Ron was not particularly surprised by this. Ever since the incident with the elf in Cornwall, he had thoroughly seen Lockhart's true nature. However, Hermione obviously didn't think so, and she retorted with a scream. "He is not a brainless idiot. I checked that everything written in his book is true." "Forget it, I think it's because he said you are the best student in the second grade." "Okay, although I agreed to help, there is a condition." George interrupted the quarrel between the two. "I heard, Hermione, that you used the freezing spell to easily immobilize a group of Cornish elves in the defense against the dark arts class. I have also been studying the freezing spell recently. I wonder if there is a chance to communicate. Freezing spell is a kind of range-wide binding magic. It is very useful for creatures with relatively small strength, but it cannot restrain creatures with strong strength. People with such strength can easily break free, but George was interested in this spell not because of this, but because the freezing spell also had a special function, which was that it could affect modern technological items. Small technological items such as anti-theft alarms and surveillance cameras will stop functioning immediately after being exposed to the freezing spell, causing the machine to fail. It is one of the spells often used by wizards in the Muggle world. If he uses this spell against Iron Man, the arc reactor in his body may be affected, causing Iron Man's steel suit to be paralyzed on the spot. No problem, I will tell you all the casting techniques of the freezing spell." When Hermione heard that George, the star of Slytherin, asked her about magic spells, she immediately raised her chin proudly. She loved being a teacher the most. In particular, George was very nice to talk to, unlike Ron, who was so stupid and taught him well and even lost his temper and ridiculed her. Abnormal. Harry and Ron looked at each other and had the same thought in their minds at the same time. The freezing curse is the most difficult spell to learn in the second grade. It will not be taught until the next semester. Hermione is already weird if she can learn it early. George has only been in first grade for a few months and he has started to learn it. Sure enough, they couldn't understand the world of academic masters. The next day, George used Lockhart's approval slip to enter the restricted area and obtained the powerful potion and handed it to Hermione. However, before handing it to Hermione, he had already recorded all the potion formulas in the entire powerful potion on the computer through the Marvel system for later use. I'm afraid even Dumbledore wouldn't believe that in just a few hours from the time he lent it to Hermione, he copied all the potion recipes in the book. After receiving the formula for Polyjuice, the trio began to think of ways to collect the precious herbs in the formula, and Hermione, a potion genius, made the Polyjuice. Polyjuice potion is a very high-end magic potion that takes about a month to successfully refine. George did not ask about these anymore, but continued to devote himself to the study of magic. The time has quickly come to the end of November, and it is also the moment that the little wizards and wizards at Hogwarts are most looking forward to, that is the Quidditch match held by the 4 major colleges in Hogwarts Castle every year. Every victory in a Quidditch match will greatly increase the points of the college. On Saturday, the first Quidditch match began, Slytherin versus Gryffindor. At breakfast, the atmosphere at the Gryffindor long table was depressing, because they knew the difficulty of this battle. Except for Harry's Nimbus 2000, the speed of all their flying brooms was much lower than Slytherin's overall Nimbus 2001, on the contrary, the atmosphere on the Slytherin side was very active, because they were very confident about the victory of this Quidditch match, and this confidence mainly came from George's performance in several training sessions. "George, do we really want to do this?" Flint, the captain of the Slytherin team, was hesitant. George replied while drinking pumpkin porridge. "I have already told the dean about this matter, and he also agreed. Since we are 100% sure to win, we must not let others gossip about us Slytherins, we must let them know that we Slytherins really won this game with our strength. This is the pattern that we Slytherins should have." "Okay, then do as you say, but if we lose at that time, you will take full responsibility." Flint gritted his teeth and nodded, although he felt that George's approach was unnecessary. The game was originally based on each means, even if it was a foul, as long as you can win, it would not hesitate, but since the dean agreed, he had nothing to say. "So, you don't believe in my strength?" George looked up at Flint, and Flint's face froze immediately, and then smiled. "Of course not, how could I not believe in your strength? George is the dean's favorite student, and whether the Slytherin team can win consecutive championships and honors before graduation depends on George, so he can't really offend him." Chapter 60 Gentleman Sword George. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It was almost 11 o'clock, and all the teachers and students in the school began to go to the Quidditch field. When passing by the Gryffindor team, George said to Harry, "Don't worry too much. For the sake of fairness, I have already suggested to the dean that except for Malfoy who will use Nimbus 2001, we will all use the previous flying brooms." Yes, that's what Flint just told him. For him, if he wins the game with Nimbus 2001, then others will think that it is because his flying broom is better than other teams that he can perform so well, which is not conducive to his plan to enhance his reputation. It's just that in the eyes of outsiders, they will only think that he is upright and noble, but in fact, compared with Flint, he is more unscrupulous. Because the premise of making this decision is that he is sure that he can win the game, not only because of his physical fitness and absolute control over the flying broom, but more importantly, if he wants, he can use his ability to influence the Golden Snitch at any time. When he is not 150 points ahead of the other team, he will not let the Golden Snitch fall into the hands of any seeker, so when the game ends and at what score, it is entirely up to him to decide. If Flint and Malfoy are real villains, they are bad people that everyone can clearly see, and it is easy to see through the character traits of Slytherin. Then George is a hypocrite who disguises himself very well. He is a positive image in front of everyone, but secretly does whatever it takes to achieve his goals. To be honest, this is really similar to Voldemort when he was young. Sometimes he wants to give himself a nickname called Gentleman Sword George. It's just that he is not so extreme, and coupled with the education he has received in his previous life, he will keep some bottom line even if he does things by any means. He thinks there are no pure good people in the world, and there are few pure bad people. In order to live better, he is willing to lean towards the bad side. "Thank you, George." Hearing George's words, Harry immediately became excited. Wood and other Gryffindor players jumped up excitedly, looking at George with admiration in their eyes. If before, except for Harry's trio, Ginny and Colin, other Gryffindors just didn't dislike George because of his speech at the beginning of the school year, now they have a good impression of him. "The most important thing about the game is fairness," George said without blushing. "It's not really cheating, after all, the rules of the game only say that magic cannot be used, but not superpowers." The Quidditch Stadium, the stands are full of students and teachers from the 4 major colleges, as well as wizards from Hogsmeade and wizards from the Ministry of Magic who were invited. Among them is Ludo Bagman, the current director of the Department of Magical Games and Sports. Is this first-year wizard named George really as good as you say? That he came here specifically this time because Hooch told him that Hogwarts had a talented player who could make the British Quidditch team rise. Although he didn't quite believe it, he still wanted to see it with hope. If the British Quidditch team didn't do well and didn't get a place in the World Quidditch Cup, he probably wouldn't be able to sit on the position of director of the Department of Magical Sports and Games for a few more years. Of course, just wait and see, Bagman. Madame Hooch waved to Ludo with confidence, then walked down the stands and entered the center of the court. She had seen Slytherin's training and was confident in George's strength. Amid the warm applause of the little wizards around, the captains of the two teams shook hands, and then both sides took off at the same time, officially starting the game. Hey, did I see it wrong? Except for Malfoy, all the Slytherin team gave up using Nimbus 2001, but at the beginning of the game, the wizard Lee Jordan, who was the commentator, was surprised to find that the flying brooms of the Strelling team were abnormal. The fact that all the members of the Strelling team were using Nimbus 2001 had also caused a sensation in Hogwarts for a while. Snape, this is not the style of your team. And you rarely stand here with me to watch the game. McGregor, who was responsible for monitoring Lee Jordan's commentary, looked at Snape standing next to her with some surprise. As the #1 Quidditch fan and once the most talented seeker of Hogwarts Gryffindor, she fell off her broom during the game in her 7th grade because of a foul by the Slytherin team, suffering a concussion and several broken ribs, so she had always hoped that Slytherin would lose miserably. This is George's suggestion. He thinks that if we Slytherins want to win, we must win openly and fairly. Snape replied without raising his head. McGregor rarely smiled gently when he heard this. George is indeed a good boy. Just for his fairness, I give Slytherin 10 points. It turned out that George from the Slytherin team proposed that the game with the other 3 colleges should be fair and just. It seems that the Slytherin team is not so fond of cheating and fouling. Lee Jordan heard the conversation between Snape and McGonagall and immediately explained it into the microphone, then he was hit on the head by the 2 deans at the same time. The last sentence just now was a joke. Let's focus on the game. Oh, George from Slytherin got the ball first, and the flying broom he controlled avoided the obstruction of all the players of the Gryffindor team in a dangerous posture. Then it went in. What a beautiful goal. Oh, it went in again. It was George again. He hung on the flying broom with one hand and kicked it into the goal. It was George again. This time he stood on the flying broom and shot the ball in an arc. It was still George. With George's various fancy goals, the Gryffindor players were stunned, and the little wizards of Slytherin in the audience below were so excited that their voices were hoarse. 120-20, there are still 50 points and it's almost over. George looked at the scoreboard and thought to himself, up to now, apart from controlling the flying broom, he really didn't cheat much, and even let Gryffindor down twice to avoid being beaten bald. There was no way, his physical advantage was too obvious, and it was basically difficult to not grab the ball with the flying broom, and it was also difficult for the opponent's players to stop him. And the golden snitch was indeed difficult to catch. Even if he didn't control it, Harry and Malfoy hadn't touched the tail of the golden snitch yet. However, just when George was about to continue to score points, an accident suddenly occurred at the scene. The black bludger seemed to be controlled and began to attack Harry frantically. Is it the house elf Dobby who started to play tricks? That he knew that it was the house elf Dobby of the Malfoy family who hid in the dark and deliberately used magic to control the bludger to attack Harry in order to let Harry go home seriously injured and not be killed by the basilisk.